episode of the BeamG podcast. This time another special, and one that's peculiar perhaps because it's more personal than usual, and one that I published on Substack first of all. So this is the full version of a text which is also available on the BeamG blog. So, without further ado, what am I talking about today? I'm talking about storytelling in the news, or storytelling techniques used in news. The title of this particular episode is Beware of Storytelling, because I'm talking about dramaturgical techniques which should, I think, be kept to a minimum in the news. Now, since I invented a storytelling tool that helps people and companies to tell better stories, it may seem a little odd that I should warn against storytelling techniques. But the thing is, well, there's a time and a place for everything. If we're watching a movie or reading a novel, we want a good story that reaches us on an emotional level. We demand to be excited and moved, aroused, even outraged or scared witless. People enjoy the emotions that stories provoke. Emotional responses are the reason that we succumb to stories in the first place. Storytellers deliberately try to elicit the visceral effect that powerful feelings engender. In order to root for the heroine, she must be placed in danger. In order to empathize with the hero, the audience must be able to identify with him and care about his fate. Writers and storytellers do a lot to engage the audience and keep them reading or viewing. The best techniques to maintain the audience's attention are the ones that grab the audience emotionally, stir them, excite them, and make them feel. Boredom sets in when there is no increased heart rate or no sweaty palms, no rapt attention. Now, newspapers and other news media, such as television or online news portals, know as well as novelists and movie makers that the promise of emotion is what gets the audience's attention in the first place, and the delivery of emotion is what maintains it. Hence, news media employ some similar techniques to fiction authors and screenwriters. Not for nothing is a news show or paper divided into stories. Structurally, the big difference between a news item and a fiction story is that a fiction story will build up towards a big climax and resolution, whereas a news story will start strong and often gradually peter out. In print, at least, this has a lot to do with the space that an editor can allocate to a journalist's piece in a newspaper, where often shortening of the text will mainly cut later paragraphs. The beginning has to be strong and contain the most interesting information, but the tacit assumption is that readers jump off somewhere in the article, many not even reaching the end. As a journalist, you might have a cute end line to a piece, but you don't keep the best till last because you know that many readers won't make it that far. Midpoint, symmetry, and other structuring devices authors use to form their stories are not quite as vital for journalists. But some techniques are common to both forms of storytelling, fiction and news. For instance, the attention-grabbing kickoff. The beginning of a book or news article must gain the audience's attention quickly, and the same is true for YouTube or TikTok videos. A good way for authors and filmmakers to achieve fast audience attention in novels or movies is by stirring a sense of unfairness, or better yet, moral outrage. Will Storr pointed out this technique in The Science of Storytelling. You present a protagonist being treated unfairly, or some obviously wrong or bad occurrence impacting an innocent character, like a crime or an act of cruelty or violence. What's going on, you ask yourself? What a terrible thing. Something needs to be done about this. The event constitutes a problem, a disturbance in the story world that will kickstart the narrative. The hero's job will be to act or react, to redress the balance, to re-establish order, to supply justice. Moral outrage is also one of the journalist's most effective tricks to gain readers' attention. The headline will tease at the outrageousness of a new problem. I took a look at some headlines from papers, picking a day more or less at random, and looked at the UK press. The Daily Mail, 11th of April, 2024. China is flooding Britain with fake stamps. The Daily Telegraph, April 10th, 2024. Phone sales to under 16s may be banned. The Daily Mirror, April 10th, 2024. Mr. Bates versus the thugs in suits. Hero tells of bid to discredit and silence him in his 23-year fight for justice. Or the Daily Express, April 10th, 2024. Bonkers ruling proves why UK should quit Euro court. Now there's a lot to unpack there. Fake Chinese stamps? Outrageous. All of these typical headlines are designed to arouse a sense of moral outrage. They promise the reader that they will, once again, have something to tut about, to shake their heads at in disbelief while actually confirming deep-seated beliefs and prejudices. The audacity of these Chinese, the bonkersness of EU law. Now, I'm going to leave aside here the political and social agendas of these newspapers. That's a can of worms, simply too big for a podcast episode. Let us concentrate on what the function of news actually might be. Why is it important to read the newspaper? Why do we even bother to keep abreast of current events? For many people, obvious answers might be in order to form an opinion, in order to understand the world, in order to be prepared if a current event has direct impact on my life. Now, to be informed is a value unto itself, perhaps a sign of being intelligent or educated. There is a significant amount of peer pressure involved too, because people might view you askance if you haven't heard the latest news. And of course, the news provide talking points, topics for conversation, and so fulfill a social function. Joanne Mahmood, in her article The Sisyphean Cycle of Technology Panics, points out the real reason for people's addiction to news. I quote, "We watch news and consume information about world events and the present condition of society, motivated by the basic need for security. Simply put, our brain is not there to make us happy. It's there to keep us safe and make sure that we stay alive." End quote. What she's talking about is an instinct still inside all of us that seeks to protect us from approaching saber-toothed tigers or marauding Neanderthalers or other threats to our survival. That is why we have a strong interest in knowing what is going on around us. We also like to gossip, to tell the latest stories to each other about other people, as Will Storr also mentions in his book. We are social animals who survive in herds, and a human herd sticks together by finding points of identification. By sharing information and value judgments thereon, we establish the sense of belonging to the group. This makes us feel safe. Not belonging means feeling alienated, outside the group, alone. And being alone means getting eaten by that tiger. The thing is, we are no longer hunter-gatherers. Our modern, high-tech, globalized societies and the way we live together is completely different from the Stone Age. We are, furthermore, way beyond the age of the printing press and mass media and even the computer age. We are now in the digital age, in which information spreads faster than ever before and in ways we barely comprehend. Our societies are complex. We live in imagined communities, with each of us in several tribes or bubbles and target groups. Society, politics, the economy, globalization, digitalization. Modern living is probably as complicated as never before in human history. Countless issues are very pressing. In a world context, the climate crisis, threats to democracy and the rise of autocracies the world over, wars, social inequality, as well as polarization, just to name a few. And in a day-to-day, more personal context, where personal concerns may be just as huge, inflation, the rising cost of living, job security, education, health, housing, to name but a few. All of these issues, along with hundreds of others, are interrelated. There are no simple answers to any of these issues, no easy solutions to any of the world's or your own personal problems. Faced with a saber-toothed tiger or marauding Neanderthalers, the options are relatively simple, as in fight or flight. Faced with any of the issues just mentioned, which threaten our perceived security, the options are much less clear-cut. Now first we should point out the effect that Joanne Mahmoud also mentions, namely that continued repetition of issues skews our perception of them, increasing our concern about them into a far greater fear than empirical reality warrants. Not everyone in a suit is a thug, and not all EU regulation is bonkers. But if we are told enough times that EU regulation is bonkers, eventually we will believe that there is some truth to such a claim, however spurious it may be. The main point I want to make here concerns not the repetition of the news stories that are influencing public opinion, but the stories themselves, or rather that news is told as stories. In a world in which, in reality, nothing is simple because everything is interconnected, and in an economy growing more entropic and unequal, in a technologically modern world getting more high-tech and complex by the quantum second, in democracies under attack from non-democratic states as well as from destabilizing forces within, is it really wise to feed the public with moral outrage? Or looking at it from another perspective, if you as a person want to stay informed and keep abreast of current affairs and the news, is it really in your interest to be morally outraged? Or would it be more effective to know the facts? It's not likely that it will be made illegal for under 16-year-olds to buy a phone. This is just one of the ideas up for discussion, as becomes apparent in the Daily Telegraph's article beneath the headline. Actually, nothing has been decided yet. There's really not much to report here, no direct impact on your life, even if you are under 16. Not to mention that it's difficult anyway for an underage person to get a phone contract. But the striking claim of the headline turns this bit of fluff into headline news on the front page of the newspaper. Like clickbait, the wording of the headline has led you into spending a couple of minutes of your life reading a story which may give you something to get excited about, may open up a fear of not being allowed a phone, oh shudder, but really has little factual content at all. Headlines promising moral outrage manipulate you. It's fine to have your emotions manipulated when you're in the cinema or reading a good novel. But do you really want a media corporation manipulating your feelings, and through these agitated feelings, your understanding of and reactions to the world? Storytelling in news is, frankly, dangerous, I think. Dramaturgical devices, proper to fiction, cause factual information to be misrepresented. Techniques that heighten emotional impact cause knee-jerk reactions rather than measured, considered, thought through, or researched, nuanced, and balanced responses to complicated situations. Furthermore, an agitated and fearful public is easily manipulated into opinions that are actually counter to its own interests. Tiger at large, strong fence imperative. Repeat such a message enough times, and you have folk formally free to roam with open horizons, hemmed in and under control within the high fence. Now, when I was growing up in England, I was often told that it was important to read several newspapers or to check your information against other sources. There was this sort of understanding that news should be neutral, especially the BBC. Everyone knew that news was not neutral, that it's impossible to be completely factual without some slant of opinion. But the guiding principle of news was to present the situation from all sides, without too much of an ideological bias, neutrally. Nowadays, nobody talks much about the desirability of neutrality in the representation of news. As a glance at the headlines of newspapers shows, there's really not even the pretense of neutral, factual reporting. News has to grab attention. News has to be entertaining. I think news should be boring. If news is entertaining, titillating, arousing, exciting, if news gets us worked up, angry, outraged, then something is wrong. Unless there is a tsunami bearing down on your house and you really need to run now, there's no need whatsoever for the news to spread panic, anger, or outrage. If the function of news is to keep you informed, then let it be informative, not sensational. If the function of news is to enable you to form an opinion, let it present the salient information so that you can form your own opinion based on the facts. Let it not manipulate you into following the agenda of the media mogul the news outlet belongs to. If the function of news is to let you know what is going on in the world so that you understand the world better, then let it explain the connections and ramifications of situations and events in a holistic, thought-through, thorough, unbiased manner, not give you tantalizing sound bites out of context. If the function of news is to help you be prepared for impacts on your life, the news should wait with the reporting of an event until enough facts are known about it and the potential consequences of the event become clear, rather than being the first to break the news of a situation going on right now, the cause, motivation, or outcome of which cannot yet be known. Now, the free press. The free press has a function in a democracy. It is a check and potential corrective to abuses of power. Reporters need freedom to report on social injustices, political impropriety, and much more. But the free press is also part of the free market economy and therefore submits to ideas such as perpetual growth, economies of scale, shareholder value, advertising revenue, profit, and so on. Each news outlet is in competition for the attention of the consumers. Every medium must vie for the attention of the audience. Therefore, any means is acceptable as long as the show meets the ratings, the paper sells the copies, the advertising revenue rolls in. Stories sell, emotions sell, outrage sells. Now, possibly the way to stop the avalanche of attention-grabbing, sensationalistic news and the clickbait, the escalation of public outrage, and the idiotic non-stories under fear-mongering headlines, is a sector-wide standard for acceptable linguistic and dramaturgical techniques in news. In most European countries, broadcasters must offer a share of their airtime to news. In Germany, radio and TV stations, in order to get a license, must, according to the terms of the Interstate Broadcasting Agreement, the Rundfunkstaatsvertrag, have news blocks. The practice is well established, it's normal. also well established in the film sector here is the voluntary self-regulation of age ratings for films. The entire film industry adheres to standard practices, with each production and distribution company kind of monitoring the others. But the language in which news is presented is not subject to standards. In print, in particular, in Germany, in the UK, Italy, elsewhere, we see the degeneration of media coverage of news into politically motivated slop. Had the front pages of Britain's papers not for months before the Brexit vote carried headlines day after day featuring Romanian rapists and Bulgarian burglars and the like, the xenophobic prejudices of the British public might not have been stoked so, and the referendum result might have been different. But I didn't want to go into the political argument. My apologies for bringing this up after all. Let's get to the end. So what's the answer to this complex problem? Well, if you're listening to this and you got this far in this podcast episode, thank you very much, which has turned out a little bit longer than I originally planned it and also has no editor to lob its end off. Well, I don't have any more for you than a piece of advice, really. If you feel yourself getting worked up while watching the news or reading the newspaper, beware. If you notice yourself tutting and shaking your head in disbelief at the audacity, the unfairness, the outrageousness of a news item, take a deep breath and a step back. You've just succumbed to a storytelling technique. Your emotions have just been manipulated. Is this the time and the place to have your feelings agitated? Are you in the cinema slurping a drink and munching popcorn? Are you cuddled up with a new novel of your favourite author? No, you're consuming the news. If you feel morally outraged, chances are the news is skewed and you're not being given a measured, considered, thought through, researched, nuanced and balanced response to a complicated situation. Thanks for listening.